It's been a week since our dog died. In that week, I feel like I've lived a lifetime. The seconds have passed like the cold, slow hours of the winter outside. This is my tribute to her and the outpouring of loss I feel in my heart. Luna was born in the cold December of 2017. Well, we don't actually know how cold it gets in Louisiana during December, so maybe it was warm. At some point, she was placed on a transport van full of 83 other puppies and sent north. She was sent to the Humane Society, and in February of 2018 was up for adoption at an adoption event at a pet supply store. My wife, daughter, and I went there with the intention of adopting a dog. What we didn't know that day is that we would be coming home with the sassiest, craziest, aloof, most loyal Whippador we had ever seen. She was the quietest of the three puppies there, but she was the one we had our hearts set on as soon as we saw her. My daughter immediately wanted to name her Buttercup. My wife and I didn't like that name, and she quickly countered it with Luna. The name was accepted, and we were on our way to being new puppy parents. After bringing her home, she was still a very quiet pup and barely barked. She loved romping around our little two-bedroom apartment and was quick to train. She was very intelligent and picked up on everything except for the kennel training. That was the big contention because she didn't like being in there at first, and it took some time to get her used to it. But boy, once she started liking it, it was near impossible to coax her out if she didn't want to come out. It truly became her safe space, and she used it as such for the rest of her life. We always made sure she had access to it if she needed to get away and relax. Unfortunately for her, her parents lost their jobs, and she had to move away from the only home she had known so far. Surprisingly, though, the transition was no problem for her, and there she had a companion to be with in the form of a chocolate lab named Patches. They got along for the most part, though Patches was a senior dog and would occasionally get annoyed with Luna's puppy energy. Eventually, Luna settled down, and they got into an understanding with each other, and their relationship was great. Almost a year after we moved, one night Luna started throwing up out of nowhere and kept doing it all night long. In the morning, we were able to get her to the vet, and they were at a loss as to what was happening. They had suspected antifreeze poisoning at first, but we explained there was absolutely no way that she could have gotten into any as it was stored in a detached garage, and we avoided any unknown puddles on our walks. They kept her for observation and to get fluids back into her system. We went home with heavy hearts thinking we were about to lose our 1-year-old pup. Thankfully, that wasn't what happened. After a couple hours, we got a call from the vet that they, after further researching her symptoms, suspect that she has Addison's disease and had started her treatment while awaiting confirmation. Their suspicions were confirmed when she started to improve immediately and then got the test results back confirming the diagnosis. She spent the weekend at the vet before she was able to come back home to us on the following Monday. As a quick aside, Addison's disease is a disorder that occurs when your adrenal glands do not produce enough of the hormones cortisol and aldosterone. It is rare in humans and dogs, and with proper treatment, life expectancy is the same as with a healthy dog. So Luna returned home with some medications to keep the Addisons in check, as well as doctor's orders to reduce her stress as much as possible. Well, good luck with that, seeing as she's mixed with two of the most anxious breeds in existence. But we were ready to take on that challenge. About 2 months later, we were able to find a house we could buy and hopefully make it Luna's forever home. We moved in July of 2019 to a house with a partially fenced-in yard and plenty of room for zoomies. She wasn't too sure about the house at first, but quickly settled in and made it her home. The spring of 2020, we were able to repair the rest of the fence and fully enclose the yard. Luna was so happy with this, as she had previously needed to either be walked by one of us or be staked out in the yard and have limited freedom of movement. With the new fence, she zoomed the yard and had a blast. She loved being able to be free and have space to run. And so for another year, we were all happy. We got into a good routine and everything was going great. Until July of 2021. She had another major crisis, and we were back in the vet office trying to stabilize her. We were able to take her home with us this time to treat her, as we thought the stress of being at the vet away from home wouldn't help the situation. We were sent home with saline bags to make sure she kept hydrated and an increase in her medication. We were able to stabilize her, but unbeknownst to us, the damage was already done. Her kidneys were damaged and now failing, though not bad enough to be detected yet. We spent the next couple of months going back and forth with the vet, trying to figure out why she would sometimes eat whatever you put in front of her, and then other days she was extremely picky about what she would eat. Finally, in January of 2022, after the picky days started to outweigh the non-picky days, we got her back in to have her labs checked again. Finally, there was something in her blood work to being detected, but it was again indicating another possible crisis. We were again given an increase in her meds and sent home with a return visit planned for the following week. When we went in on that Monday, we were definitely concerned as she had had an accident in the house the previous day and had thrown up at the morning of the appointment. We went in and her blood was drawn again for what would be the last time. This time, the results were more clear. Her kidney levels were through the roof and were definitely failing. The doctor sent us home with some new meds and a hope that she might be able to slow down the failure and give us some time. This is not how things went. By Tuesday, the lethargy was setting in and she was clearly not feeling well. Wednesday was worse when she was barely able to stand on her own. It was at this point that we knew it was the end for sure and scheduled her euthanasia for that Saturday so that we could both be there with her when it happened. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, she didn't make it to then. Thursday, she was deteriorating even faster. It had been over 48 hours since we were last able to get her to eat something. Friday morning, I had to help her stand up and hold her up while she walked anywhere. Not that she was moving much at that point anyway. At 3 p.m., I wrapped her in one of her blankets and kissed her head. I went into the home office to check some emails, and when I went back to check on her around 3:20, she was gone. She had passed on her own and was no longer suffering. Surprising to me was the immediate feeling of relief. I had been agonizing about our decision to put her down. I'm sure every pet owner goes through this when they have to make these decisions. What if she makes a miraculous recovery? What if we're missing something? These nagging doubts that had haunted me the whole week had now been reduced to nothing. For me personally, it was also comforting that she passed at home, rather than in the cold clinical setting of a vet office. She was in the home she loved, surrounded by all the toys and blankets and everything we had given to her. I called my wife to tell her the news, and that's when I first cried. When she got home from work, I wrapped Luna in the blanket we brought her home in so that we could still take her to the vet in the morning for the cremation services. We dripped essential oils on the blanket and had a little ceremony together. The following morning, we brought her body to the vet and handed her over with the assurance that we would have her remains back within 2 weeks. At this point, I had only cried another 2 times randomly over the couple of hours between her passing and was feeling surprisingly okay. In retrospect, it seems like this was probably some sort of psychological defense mechanism. Who knows? I'm no brain scientist. The next day, I was still feeling the same, maybe a little more sad, but still not really crying or feeling sorry for myself. So Monday comes, and things really start to hit me then. The week I had spent providing hospice care for my dying dog finally caught up with me. I was in the backyard at some point and saw her footprints in the snow. It was that moment that sent me over the edge, and I cried harder than I had cried in a very long time. Tuesday it came harder. I decided to put her most favorite toys in a different place from everything else because I wanted to incorporate them into some sort of memorial for her once we got her remains. Just touching them and putting them away was enough to send me into another crying session. Wednesday evening in the shower was the last one I had, and by far was the hardest cry I have ever had. I went to turn on my podcast and accidentally hit my gallery instead. I was greeted with all sorts of pictures of Luna, and it was just too much for me. So that brings us to Friday, a week later. A week that felt like a lifetime. Time seems to be returning to normal for me. Each day doesn't feel like as much of a slog anymore, at least returning to the slog levels I'm used to. Am I over Luna? Hardly. I think I may be through the worst of it, but I still feel the empty space in my chest that used to be occupied by her. I still think about all the adventures we had planned, the things we had planned for what we thought would be the end of her life in another 10 years. Those dreams are now ghosts that will haunt me forever. Sure, the footprints will melt with the snow and the memories will fade with age, but she was the first dog I could call mine, and that is something that will never leave. Luna, thank you for your life, and thank you for being the best dog we could have ever asked for.